before we start, I know what I'm trying to do is make the notice come up that says you are being recorded, and it's not happening, so not a biggie. Good morning, everyone. Hello, everyone out there in Facebook land. Good morning, Daryll. How you doing, man?
Good morning.
You doing good?
Mr. Ballard.
Yeah.
I'm doing okay.
That's good.
And
That's
you?
good. That's good. I'm doing okay. We already had our discussion about our weekend, so we won't bore. I'm going to ask you a question because something happened while we were playing the song that has never happened before. What do you think about when we're playing?
What do I think about?
Yeah. What do you think about when we're playing?
I only think about what we're playing.
I wish I could say that. I try to do that, but I think about sometimes other things. And while we were playing, I was thinking about something. The sad thing is, I don't remember what it was. It had something to do with, being what we're doing here. But I wasn't thinking about the song. We played it so many times.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed, but I missed a little, the bing. You didn't
Okay.
notice.
Okay.
You didn't notice. I totally missed it.
Well, it's because I'm so wrapped up in what I'm
See,
doing.
you're concentrating. And then the bad thing is, as we continue through the song, I couldn't help thinking about, I missed the ping, I missed the ping, you know, so.
That's okay.
I need to make sure that I'm concentrating. Hope everyone is doing well. Adam has joined us. Good morning, Adam. We're so glad you're here with us today. And let's see, we've got something here. Hang on for a second. That is Granger Massey. Do you know Granger Massey?
No, I don't.
I don't know Granger Massey either. And Granger, how you doing? We're glad you joined us this morning. We hope you hang around. I guess first let's go ahead and start out with a prayer, and then we'll get into today's
Very good.
readings. I want to say hi to Nini. Nini, as you know, is down in the mountains of Brazil.
Yes.
She keeps sending me, little. We do some video chatting and so forth, and she keeps showing me, this beautiful countryside that she's enjoying, and I have mixed feelings of envy, and I'm glad I'm not there.
Oh.
I mean, I'd love to be there with her, but they're out in the country.
Yeah.
In the country. It's beautiful, but man, I grew up in the country.
I know.
And as you know, there's some wonderful things about being in the country, but it's like year-round camping. And
Right.
I have plenty of that, and so I love her and I wish her well, and I'll be happy when she comes back. But I'm glad I'm just experiencing it by way of video. Let's put it that way. They're climbing, not climbing, but walking up mountain trails and so forth. But you see this beautiful scenery. Let's take a moment out for prayer. Magnified be thy name, O Lord my God. Thou art he whom all things worship, and who worshipeth no one, who is the Lord of all things, and is the vassal of none, who knoweth all things, and is known of none. Thou didst wish to make thyself known unto men. Therefore thou didst, through a word of thy mouth, bring creation into being and fashion the universe. There is none other God except thee, the fashioner, the creator, the Almighty, the most powerful. I implore thee by this very word that hath shone forth above the horizon of thy will, to enable me to drink deep of the living waters through which thou hast vivified the hearts of thy chosen ones, and quickened the souls of them that love thee, that I may at all times and under all conditions turn my face wholly towards thee. Thou art the God of power, of glory, and bounty. No God is there beside thee, the supreme ruler, the all-glorious, the omniscient. And this is a prayer by Bahá'u'lláh. Now, as you know, for those of you who have been joining us, we started a new book last week, and this is the book, The Advent of Divine Justice. It is actually a letter written by Shoghi Effendi to the North American Baha'is in 1938, Canadians and the Baha'is of the United States. And I don't guess we need to recap.
He basically talks about why he's written this letter, and it is based on so much of what's going on at the time that it was written. And after kind of rereading it, I kind of made a determination that so much of what's here applies to what's going on in the world today.
Absolutely.
And because it does, I think it's relevant material for us to review and to study based on what what he is calling for us to do and what Baha'u'llah's plan for the world is. And he placed a lot of faith in the Americans to make his new world order come into being. So, and that's what this is all about.
And if you're like me and you come into this reading with that special gift of ignorance, the gift of ignorance, this is a challenging read because of Shoghi Effendi. We've talked about that so many times. It's a challenging read. But the more and more I read it, the more I understand why you recommended it. And I'm so glad that I, kind of said, okay, because it's not all up to me. I mean, it's not like I'm any kind of a boss or anything, but I'll admit I was not, as you know, I wasn't comfortable. But now, the more I read this, the more I feel like, yeah, you're 100% correct. People need to hear this message from 80-something years ago. They need to hear it today. They definitely do. There's no question about it. So last week we got up to the 11th paragraph, which is I don't guess the number 11 needs any explaining. The 11th paragraph, but it was. I mean, he's got a different edition, and he's got subtitles.
Yes, headings.
Okay. So
Chapter headings.
Yeah, chapter headings. Even though this was a letter, it's been divided into chapters. I don't have the benefit of that, even though I think mine is a later edition.
It is.
Okay.
For sure.
I want chapter headings too. Okay, so Daryll, would you like to begin?
Sure. This chapter in my version of this starts with the chief remaining citadel.
Before you start, there's something else I want to say. In this section, I'm assuming we're going to get through a certain amount. And when I was reading, I noticed Shogi Effendi asks a lot of questions.
Yes.
Yes, a lot of questions. There's a point where he asks 13 questions that are very, very important. But he also points out, I think there were, I counted, 9 challenges, shall we say, that the Baha'is of North America have to deal with. Anyway, I just want you to listen with that context. There are going to be some challenges put forth that are existing, and yet the questions that he asked are actually questions, who else could do this but those people? So please.
And based on my reading, I don't know that we'll get to all of those today, but we're gonna try.
Okay.
The one chief remaining citadel, the mighty arm which still raises aloft the standard of an unconquerable faith, is none other than the blessed community of the followers of the most great name in the North American continent. By its works, and through the unfailing protection vouchsafed to it by an almighty providence, this distinguished member of the body of the constantly interacting Baha'i communities of the East and West bids fair to be universally regarded as the cradle as well as the stronghold of that future new world order, which is at once the promise and the glory of the dispensation associated with the name of Bahá'u'lláh. Now this is he talks about this new world order. And the new world order at one point in time in our history was something that was to be shunned, something to go away from. But this new world order talks about the world order of Bahá'u'lláh, which is something quite different from what the previous previous ideas of New World Order were meant to be.
You know, when you mentioned that, I'm glad you brought a special, you emphasized that, because as you pointed out, the idea of a New World Order has in recent years during our time has been kind of lambasted and pointed out as something to be feared and sort of a source of threat. And I can't help, I ask myself the question that I always like to consider when I start reading this, and I know how some people look upon that with disdain. How's the old world? How's the old world order working for you? It's just, it's not.
Okay, let anyone inclined to either belittle the unique station conferred upon this community or to question the role it will be called upon to play in the days to come, ponder the implication of these pregnant and highly illuminating words uttered by Abdul-Baha and addressed to it at a time when the fortunes of the world, groaning beneath the burden of a devastating war, and he's talking about World War I here, had reached their lowest ebb. The continent of America, he so significantly wrote, is in the eyes of the one true God, the land wherein the splendors of his light shall be revealed, where the mysteries of his faith shall be unveiled, where the righteous will abide and the free assemble. So that's putting a lot of onus on the American population. Already the community of the believers of the North American continent, at once the prime mover and pattern of the future communities of the faith of Bahá'u'lláh, is destined to raise up throughout the length and breadth of the Western Hemisphere, has, despite the prevailing gloom, shown its capacity to be recognized as the torchbearer of that light, the repository of those mysteries, the exponent of that righteousness, and the sanctuary of that freedom. To what other light can these above-quoted words possibly allude, if not to the light of the glory of the golden age of the faith of Bahá'u'lláh? What mysteries could Abdul-Baha have contemplated except the mysteries of that embryonic world order, now evolving within the matrix of his administration? What righteousness, if not the righteousness of those of righteousness whose reign that age and that order can establish? What righteousness, if not the righteousness whose reign that age and that order can establish? What freedom, but the freedom which the proclamation of his sovereignty in the fullness of time must bestow?
You know, Daryll, I mentioned 13 questions. This is not part of the 13, but I think it's important that we point out that, again, he's simply saying to me, again, this is to me, who else? What else could this mean? What else could this mean? Or in other words, kind of put in the form of a question, but basically saying it couldn't mean anything else. The community of the believers of the North American continent at once, they're simultaneously the prime mover and pattern of the future communities. He's alluding to the future. Where else could this happen? Who else could do this? And so I just feel that all these questions he's asking at this point is sort of like, what else could it mean? It couldn't possibly mean anything else. And again, question after question after question, but the answer is understood.
Yeah,
the answer is understood. So I just want
But he's also saying that because the American continent and because of the freedoms that we already have and because of the communities that we've already established, America is prime for what is to come next. And it is in no other community. And he chose the American community specifically to be the harbinger of what is to come.
And I'll say this too, as I was reading this, I don't know, I think at first I had sort of a feeling of pride by proxy, almost like, yeah, that's us. But then the more I thought about it, it's like, no, number one, okay, he may be talking about the future, but in the big picture, yes, he's talking to anyone who reads this. But specifically, he's talking to the Baha'is of that time about the future.
Right.
And so I almost felt like it's one thing to feel a sense of pride about, let's say, your ancestral heritage or whatever. I look at these as our spiritual ancestors, the people that this is addressed to. But the more I read, the more I had this feeling of, okay, yes, he's putting down all these, he's describing all these positive characteristics, all these positive conditions and so forth, and the audacity that the American believers at that time had in going to other places and teaching. But then I came back to the question of what are we, or more specifically, but what am I doing?
Right.
Could these things actually apply to me based on how I'm, carrying myself in regards to the faith?
The community of the organized promoters of the faith of Bahá'u'lláh in the American continent, the spiritual descendants of the dawnbreakers of an heroic age, who by their death proclaim the birth of that faith, must, in turn, usher in, not by their death, but through living sacrifice at that promised world order, the shell ordained to enshrine that priceless jewel, the world civilization, of which the faith itself is the sole begetter. While its sister communities are bending beneath the tempestuous winds that beat upon them from every side. This community, talking about the Americans, preserved by the immutable decrees of the omnipotent ordainer, talking about God as ordained this, and deriving continual sustenance from the mandate which the tablets of the divine plan have invested it, is now busily engaged in laying the foundations and in fostering the growth of those institutions which are to herald the approach of the age destined to witness the birth and rise of the world order of Bahá'u'lláh.
You know, I think it's also important that, you know, while he's pointing out a lot of positive attributes about the North American community, a lot of it seems, again, this is me, seems to have more to do with the conditions surrounding that community.
Absolutely.
You know, he talks about, he at least mentions our sister communities in other places. He says, while its sister communities are bending beneath the tempestuous winds that beat upon them from every side, other Baha'i communities in other parts of the world were going through a lot of tough stuff, a lot of adversities, and still are today, but going through a lot of adversities that, of course, made it much more difficult, maybe even impossible, to accomplish some of the things that the American communities were capable of accomplishing. Absolutely.
A community relatively negligible.
I'm sorry. Folks, here, I just want to point out that he's going to point out a whole lot of barriers or challenges that even the American community is having, you know, that they're having to deal with and yet are overcoming. So I think it's a good idea to listen to these challenges, because he lists, I believe it's 9 of them, 9 challenges, and then juxtapose it against, again, the conditions of today.
Sure. A community relatively negligible in its numerical strength, meaning that there aren't a lot, separated by vast distances both from the focal center of its faith and the land wherein the preponderating mass of its fellow believers reside, meaning mostly Iran. Bereft in the main of material resources and lacking in experience and in prominence, ignorant of the beliefs, concepts, and habits of those people and races from which its spiritual founders have sprung, wholly unfamiliar with the languages in which its sacred books are originally revealed, constrained to place its sole reliance upon an inadequate rendering of only a fragmentary portion of the literature embodying its laws, its tenets, and its history, subjected from its infancy to tests of extreme severity, involving at times the defection of some of its most prominent members, having to contend ever since its inception and in an ever-increasing measure with the forces of corruption, of moral laxity, and ingrained prejudice. Such a community, in less than half a century, and unaided by any of its sister communities, whether in the East or in the West, has, by virtue of the celestial potency with which an all-loving master has abundantly endowed it, lent an impetus to the onward march of the cause it has espoused, which the combined achievements of its co-religionists in the West have failed to rival.
Okay, now you know you have to stop for a while.
Yes.
That's a lot. I mean, think about the things. He's just running off a laundry list of challenges, you know, that again, the American community, and I prefer to say the North American community because, you know, in today's language, we think of Americans as people of the U.S., but again, we want to remind you this was to all Baha'is of North America. Yes. Right. I mean, you think about it. Negligible in its numerical strength, small. We're still in the big picture, we're still kind of small. You know, larger than we were then, but still kind of small. in the bigger picture. Separated by vast differences from both the focal center of his faith and the land wherein the preponderating mass of its fellow believers reside.
Speaking of Iran.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But has that challenge been at least kind of in certain ways, I don't know what the word is on the lessened? Is it less of a challenge now that we've got, traveling is easier, technology allows us?
Not much less. No.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay. Bereft in the main of material resources and lacking in experience and in prominence. We ain't got much. Bereft in the main of material resources and lacking in experience and in prominence. Has that changed? I know it hasn't gone away, but I don't know. Would you say that?
Well, I think the challenges are a little less now than they were back then, but
Okay.
we still have some of the same challenges.
I know the answer to the next part, but I'm going to read it anyway. Ignorant of the beliefs, concepts, and habits of those peoples and races from which its spiritual founders have sprung. Spiritual founders. We're talking
Again, he's talking about the
Bahá'u'lláh,
Iranians, right.
Bahá'u'lláh. And, ignorant of the beliefs, concepts, and habits of those peoples and races, I don't know. Does that matter?
I think to some extent it does, but in terms of what the challenges were for us going forward, no, it doesn't matter.
I think you're right, but I can tell you, just to give my own experience, most of the people, a lot of the earlier Baha'is that I met, were in this area, were from Iran.
Yeah.
And, that part in and of itself for me, I don't think that mattered. What I noticed was when I started going to Baha'i gatherings and I noticed this, a strong cultural Persian element in just the gatherings as far as, you go and you see art you've never seen before, you see people congregating, that you even hear prayers you've never heard before. And I think for some people that can present a challenge if they are not willing to get outside of their own kind of egocentric or ethnocentric view of what worship is supposed to consist of. It really does necessitate, I think, for the person who might just be your average American, who has not been exposed to any elements of, the Iranian...
Eastern culture.
Yeah,
right?
Eastern culture, there you go. It means, you've got to be kind of open-minded and just open-minded. Get outside your comfort zone.
Right.
Be willing. And then wholly unfamiliar with the languages in which its sacred books were originally revealed. Okay, we know that. Constrained to place its sole reliance upon an inadequate rendering of only a fragmentary portion of the literature. In other words, we're talking the Baha'i writings. Okay, and again, this is my own...
In their original form.
Yeah, so a lot of which still has not been translated.
Right.
Okay, that's in process, or in progress. But he'd say, the literature that they had access to, so much less than what actually existed, as far as in the language that they could understand, and that so that's a challenge. I remember hearing about some village. I don't even remember what country it was in, but it was what most people might consider in our society might consider a primitive village. And I've heard this story more than once, but they had nothing but a copy of the hidden words.
Mm.
That's what they had.
Yeah.
So subjected from its infancy to tests of extreme severity, involving at times the defection of some of its most prominent members. So some people decided, I'm out of here. Yeah. Corruption.
Right.
This was hard for me to read. I know it's having to contend ever since its inception, and in an ever increasing measure with the forces of corruption, moral laxity, ingrained prejudice. We don't have any of those problems today.
Right.
But he said, and unaided by such a community in less than half a century, and unaided by any of its sister communities, whether in the East or the West, has lent an impetus to the onward march of the cause.
Right.
Yeah, I just felt like all those little challenges.
Right.
To me, it's like saying, you don't have an excuse today. They dealt with a lot, you're dealing with a lot, you're still expected. That you can look at your spiritual ancestors and see what they accomplished. You're expected to continue on too.
Yeah.
Why
Why don't you read the next chapter?
Okay, these are these questions that I mentioned, and it is just a series of questions, and it starts, most of these questions, not all of them, but most of these start with, what other community, in other words, what other community could have done this? And this is again coming from Shoghi Effendi. What other community, it can confidently be asked, what other community has been instrumental in fixing the pattern, meaning setting the pattern, and in imparting the original impulse to those administrative institutions that constitute the vanguard, the front line of the world order of Bahá'u'lláh? Next question. What other community has been capable of demonstrating with such consistency the resourcefulness, the discipline, the iron determination, the zeal and perseverance, the devotion and fidelity, what else so indispensable to the erection and the continued extension of the framework within which those nascent communities can alone multiply and mature? In other words, the framework was being set. What other community could have done that at that time? Next question. What other community has proved itself to be fired by so noble a vision, or willing to rise to such heights of self-sacrifice, or ready to achieve so great a measure of solidarity as to be able to raise in so short a time, and in the course of such crucial years, an edifice that can well deserve to be regarded as the greatest contribution ever made by the West to the cause of Bahá'u'lláh? What is that edifice? What is that edifice that was raised to be regarded as the greatest contribution ever made by the West?
Yeah.
Yes. What other community can justifiably lay claim to have succeeded through the unsupported efforts of one of its humble members in securing the spontaneous allegiance of royalty to its cause? And I believe we're talking about the king, I can't remember the nation, but
It's Samoa?
yes, the king of Samoa at that time, in securing the spontaneous allegiance of royalty to its cause, and in winning such marvelous and written testimonies in its truth.
To its truth.
To its truth, yes, thank you. Next question. What other community has shown the foresight, the organizing ability, the enthusiastic eagerness that have been responsible for the establishment and multiplication throughout its territory of those initial schools which, as time goes by, will, on the one hand, evolve into powerful centers of Baha'i learning, and on the other, provide a fertile recruiting ground for the enrichment and consolidation of its teaching force? Next question. What other community has produced pioneers combining to such a degree the essential qualities of audacity, of consecration, of tenacity, of self-renunciation, and unstinted devotion that have prompted them to abandon their homes and forsake their all and scatter over the surface of the globe and hoist in its uttermost corners the triumphant banner of Baha'u'lláh? And then he starts asking, who else? Who else but the members of this community have won the eternal distinction of being the first to raise the call of Ya Baha'u'lláh in such highly important and widely scattered centers and territories as the hearts of both the British and French empires, Germany, the Far East, the Balkan states, the Scandinavian countries, Latin America, the islands of the Pacific, South Africa, Australia and New Zealand, and now, more recently, the Baltic states? Before I said Baltic states. I think Balkan states was the phrase, Balkan states. So this is the Baltic states. Who else but those same pioneers have shown themselves ready to undertake the labor, to exercise the patience, and to provide the funds required for the translation and publication in no less than 40 languages of their sacred literature, the dissemination of which is an essential prerequisite to any effectively organized campaign of teaching. You know, I want to stop here, not stop, but
Right.
how many times, I don't know if you've ever, I've had to answer this question to some people, you know, talking to them about the faith. I've heard some people say, I hear it's about nothing but money, which my first answer is, well, if it's about
Wrong.
money, they wouldn't have me in there if it was about money, because I ain't got none. But secondly, yes, any world faith is going to be asking for contributions. And these are some of the reasons. Who else but those same pioneers have shown themselves ready to undertake the labor, to exercise the patience, and to provide the funds required? Translation and publication. These books are not made for free.
That's right.
Their sacred literature has to be spread, the dissemination of which is an essential prerequisite to any effectively organized campaign of teaching. It takes material, and materials cost money.
That's right.
What other community can lay claim to have had a decisive share in the worldwide efforts that have been exerted for the safeguarding and the extension of the immediate surrounding of its holy shrines? Holy shrines are, they act as a magnet, they act as a landmark of this faith.
Right.
Of course, they were built for free, were they not? They didn't cost anything to build. No, they cost money, as well as for the preliminary acquisition of the future sites of its international institutions at its world center. What other community can, to its eternal credit, claim to have been the first to frame its national and local constitutions, thereby laying down the fundamental lines of the twin charters designed to regulate the activities, define the functions, and safeguard the rights of its institutions? What other community can boast of having simultaneously acquired and legally secured the basis of its national endowments, thus paving the way for a similar action on the part of its local communities? What other community has achieved the supreme distinction of having obtained, long before any of its sister communities had envisioned such a possibility, the necessary documents assuring the recognition by both the federal and state authorities, of its spiritual assemblies and national endowments? And finally, what other community has had the privilege and been granted the means to succor the needy, succor meaning strengthening, to succor the needy, to plead the cause of the downtrodden, and to intervene so energetically for the safeguarding of Baha'i edifices and institutions in countries such as Persia, Egypt, Iraq, Russia, and Germany, where at various times the fellow believers had to suffer the rigors of both religious and racial persecution? Who else could have done these things under those circumstances? It's not that, it's not that we, I don't know, I want to add something, but we can add anything to that. I just feel like while he's saying the American community has done some wonderful things, he's also pointing out the American community had the resources.
Right.
They have the resources. And, in many cases, when we compare ourselves to Baha'is and other nations, it's probably the same way. Probably the same thing. Now, I noticed you picked up your instrument, Daryll.
Yeah, it's time for us.
Okay, let me make sure I've got this set up right. I'm not sure that I have. I don't know that I've got the speed on this thing correct. I hope I do. Oh, no. I didn't want the battery to run. tonight.
All right.
I don't know if we should continue. It's
No,
too late.
I think we should.
That last question. And finally, what other community has had the privilege and been granted the means to succor the needy, to plead the cause of the downtrodden, and to intervene so energetically for the safeguarding of Baha'i edifices? And for anyone who wonders about these Baha'i edifices, if you go online and look up Baha'i houses of worship, you will see some of the most beautiful works of art, works of architecture around the world. Or just, bring up Baha'i World Center and you'll see even more. So energetically for the safeguarding of Baha'i edifices and institutions in countries such as Persia, Egypt, Iraq, Russia, and Germany. This is the part I wanted to repeat, where at various times its fellow believers have had to suffer the rigors of both religious and racial persecution.
Yeah.
Obviously, people are still dealing with those today in different places. Certainly no exception here. We've personally heard stories from some Baha'is who have come from the Persian Baha'is who have moved to the U.S. They can tell you from a personal standpoint, some of their stories of their own family members, people that they knew, people that they lost. I mean, so this persecution is not something that, ended in 1938.
Not at all.
It continues today. At this time, okay, we'll stop. We'll stop. I know I did a lot of talking to the idea. I kind of slowed things down. I don't know. Well, I don't know.
No, that's okay.
We got further than you expected to get, didn't
Yes.
we? We did. So there. But at this time, if we have anyone who would like to share prayer or a psalm or reading, this is that time. And as always, we like to begin with our Camby's moment. Camby's, do you have something to share with us today?
Sure. I practice the song, so I'm going to present it.
Please.
فرج لنا بالفضل والإحسان إنك رحمن منان إنك رحمن منان الله أكبر الله أكبر. Only these are the verses that the disciples of Bahá'u'lláh, when they were in prison, they were chanting to the court of the Shah in Iran.
I'm almost tempted to ask you to do that again. I didn't have you on camera while you were doing it. I'm gonna, yes. Kambiz.
Yeah,
Could you do that just one more time, please? Because that was beautiful.
sure.
Please. Thank you so much, Kambiz. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to share?
Ya Ilahi, اسمك شفائي وذكرك دوائي وقربك رجائي وحبك مونسي ورحمتك طبيبي ومعيني في الدنيا والآخرة إنك أنت المعطي العليم الحكيم إنك أنت المعطي العليم الحكيم.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is there anyone else who would like to share? Well, I'd like to say this prayer for anyone who's having to deal with, any number of challenges, illness or other problems. Giti and Farhad's mother-in-law, but Giti's mother is in the hospital and Giti is with her now. So this is a prayer for tests and difficulties. O thou whose tests are a healing medicine to such as are nigh unto thee, whose sword is the ardent desire of all them that love thee, whose dart is the dearest wish of those hearts that yearn after thee, whose decree is the sole hope of them that have recognized thy truth. I implore thee, by thy divine sweetness and by the splendors of the glory of thy face, to send down upon us from thy retreats on high that which will enable us to draw nigh unto thee. Set then our feet firm, O my God, in thy cause, and enlighten our hearts with the effulgence of thy knowledge, and illumine our breaths with the brightness of thy name. And this is a prayer by Bahá'u'lláh.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to share? Oh, give me a moment. Let me make sure I'm not cutting Daryl's head off here. There we go. Well, friends,
As we are known to say every week, this effort, these devotions and these studying that we do is a result of the collaborative efforts of several different communities. Most distinctly the Baha'is of Clearwater, and the Baha'is of Newport Richey, where I'm from, and the Baha'is of Pinellas County, where Tony's from, and other communities. And this could not go on without the support of all of those communities. And if you happen to be someone who's interested in the Baha'i faith and would like to get more information, there are some definitive websites. They are www.baha'i.us, www.baha'is.org, www.clearwaterbaha'is.org, and one other, www.baha'iteachings.org. So,
and we do encourage anyone who's, again, interested in the faith. I've heard recently that, there's been an increase in the number of people that are coming to the faith because they learned about it.
online.
And usually there seems to be kind of a process where, they learn about it online, they seek out local Baha'is, and who then are, of course, willing to share and teach them to the best of their abilities what this faith is about. And whereas we are absolutely forbidden to proselytize, we certainly are able to, teach the faith to anyone who's interested, to the best of our ability. And as I occasionally like to point out, that's so important because we don't have a special class of clergy that job is relegated to or is given to. We're all supposed to be teaching the faith to the best of our ability, and there are many different ways to do it. Certainly, hopefully through our life example, but also through actually sharing these writings and the additional, literature that has developed over time. A lot of people there are now involved in, the Rui books.
Right.
I'm having such a senior moment right now, but there's a term for the Rui books, and it's not Rui books. It's someone else I'm sure out there knows. But there are different ways that you can access literature about the faith, about the Baha'i faith, and those websites are a wonderful place to start. For anyone who's wondering, once again, we've done several books since from the beginning, actually prior to the pandemic, but certainly from the beginning as well. And so now, again, we're studying the Advent of Divine Justice by Shoghi Effendi. And I say that because there are different ways you can get the book. There are publishing companies. You could even get this on Amazon.
Right.
But of course there are specifically Baha'i publishing outlets, organizations, companies that you can get it from, or you can go to one of those Baha'i websites and Read it right
Get
there
it
for
from
free.
there.
Yeah, read
That's
it
right.
for free. Print it out if you want. So anyway, just letting you know if you want to get your own copy. So as you know, I'm sure you noticed, especially with Shoghi Effendi, we read some, and then we take time to kind of break it down, which we kind of do anyway, but we have to do a lot more of it now. So this is going to be a bit of a journey, shall we say,
Yes.
and yet an important journey that we go on. And so,
Well, the other thing I'd like to say is even though this particular book was directed to the Baha'is of the U.S., it's not just, its interest should not just be for Baha'is.
yes,
It should be for the population of North America, period.
absolutely.
So not just Baha'is.
So, I know you're not going to start playing right away. You have something you have to say, don't you?
Well, what I have to say is that the one prescription that I can give to anyone who's listening today is that, and when I say prescription, I mean like any other drug that you might come in contact with or might have reason to be taking, the one that you should be taking and the one that will probably provide the most healing you could imagine is that gift of love. And I ask that all of you share that prescription with everyone that you know this week. Share the love.
Thank you, Dr. King. Everyone, have yourself a good week. O people of justice, be as brilliant as the light, and as splendid as the fire that blazed in the burning bush. The brightness of the fire of your love will no doubt fuse and unify the contending peoples and kindreds of the earth. Whilst the fierceness of the flame of enmity and hatred cannot but result in strife and ruin. We beseech God that he may shield his creatures from the evil designs of his enemies. He verily hath power over all things. Let your vision be world embracing. Let your vision be world embracing. Let your vision be world embracing. trap you. Gird yourselves against his wicked devices. And led by the light of the name of the all-seeing God, make your escape from the darkness that surrounded you. Let your vision be world-embracing, rather than confined to your own self. These are the words of Bahá'u'lláh. Be world-embracing. Let your vision be world-embracing. Let your vision be world-embracing. Everyone have a good week. Aloha. Spread the
Thank you very
love.
much for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah. I'm glad we finally got to hear your voice.
Aloha, bye, everyone.
And take care. Have a good week. Everyone out there in Facebook land,
Aloha.
take care, Zila. Take care, Farhad. We'll keep praying for your mom, Giti. Kambiz, take care. Thanks for sharing, as always. And Adam, thanks for hanging in there, man. Okay. Brenda Scott. Do you know Brenda
She's
Scott?
back. Yeah.
She's back. We're glad Brenda shared with what was able to be with us. Hi, Brenda. I don't know if you're still watching. We see we've got 4 people on. Maybe she's still there, maybe not. But everyone, hi. Have a good week.